There are nights when the world goes quiet, but your mind does not. The room is still, the lights are low, the day is over, and yet something inside you keeps moving. One thought becomes two, two become 10. A simple memory turns into an argument with yourself. A decision becomes a courtroom. A mistake from years ago suddenly feels alive again. A future that has not happened yet begins to press against your chest as if it is already here. If you know that feeling, then this audiobook is for you. This is for the person who looks calm on the outside while carrying a storm inside. For the person who replays conversations after they end, who worries before anything even happens, who wants peace but feels trapped in a mind that never seems to rest. This is for the one who is tired of living in loops, tired of mentally preparing, mentally defending, mentally revisiting, mentally forecasting, tired of trying to think their way into safety and instead thinking their way out of peace. Overthinking is not a character flaw. It is not proof that you are broken. It often begins as an attempt to protect yourself. Your mind believes that if it can analyze enough, remember enough, predict enough, and control enough, then maybe it can keep you from pain. But somewhere along the way, what started as protection became pressure. What started as awareness became exhaustion. And what started as thought became noise. The good news is that peace is not reserved for other people. It is not only for those with easy lives, simple minds, or perfect circumstances. Peace is available to you too, not because life suddenly becomes flawless, but because you can learn a new relationship with your thoughts. You can notice them without obeying them. You can feel deeply without drowning. You can reflect without getting stuck. You can prepare without panicking. You can remember without reliving. You can care without carrying the whole world in your chest. In the chapters ahead, we will walk slowly through the inner landscape of overthinking. We will look at why the mind does this, what it costs you, what triggers it, and how it quietly shapes your days. We will explore the psychology behind mental spirals and the practical tools that can help you interrupt them. We will talk about regret, fear, control, the body, and the daily habits that either drain your peace or protect it. And most of all, we will return again and again to one gentle truth. You do not need to believe every thought you think. So take a breath. Let your shoulders soften a little. You do not need to solve your entire life tonight. You do not need to untangle every fear before morning. You do not need to finish the race in a single leap like some heroic knight charging a dragon made of email, regret, and caffeine. You only need to begin here. And we begin with understanding. Chapter 1. Why the mind overthinks. Overthinking often feels like a personal failure, but in many cases, it is a very human response to uncertainty. When your mind starts spinning, it can seem as though something inside you is malfunctioning. Why can't you just let it go? Why do other people appear to move on so easily while you keep circling the same questions? Why does your mind treat one awkward moment, one unopened message, one difficult decision, or one uncertain future event like a full-scale crisis? The answer is not that your mind is weak. Often, it is trying too hard. The mind overthinks because it is built to detect problems and avoid danger. Long before modern stress, the brain learned to scan for threats. It learned to remember pain so it could prevent it from happening again. It learned to search for patterns, fill in gaps, and prepare for what might go wrong. This was useful when danger was immediate and physical. But in modern life, many threats are emotional, social, and imagined. Your brain still uses old survival machinery, but now it applies it to text messages, performance reviews, relationships, finances, family tension, and the pressure to make the right choices. That is why your mind can treat uncertainty like an emergency. It does not always know the difference between a tiger in the bushes and a vague fear about how tomorrow's meeting might go. Psychologists often describe the brain as having a negativity bias. This means it is more likely to notice, remember, and react strongly to what feels threatening than to what feels safe. A kind comment may brighten your day, but a single criticism can echo for hours. A calm week may pass quietly, but one moment of embarrassment gets replayed like an unwanted song. This bias does not mean you are pessimistic by nature. It means your brain has been trained, through evolution and experience, to pay close attention to discomfort. Now add emotion to that. If you have been hurt before, rejected before, shamed before, disappointed before, or forced to carry too much responsibility too early, your mind may become especially vigilant. It starts trying to stay ahead of pain by predicting it. It says, if I can think this through enough, maybe I can stop it. If I can prepare for every outcome, maybe nothing will catch me off guard. If I can rehearse every conversation, maybe I won't be misunderstood. If I can analyze every detail, maybe I'll be safe. But overthinking does not usually create safety. It creates the feeling of doing something while keeping you trapped in the same emotional room. Imagine a woman named Lena driving home after a meeting with her boss. The meeting was neutral, maybe even mildly positive, but her boss paused for a second before answering one of her questions. That pause becomes the seed. On the drive home, Lena starts thinking, did I sound unsure? Was I annoying? Do they regret putting me on that project? By dinner, the pause has become a story. By bedtime, the story has become a threat. Her body tightens. Her chest feels heavy. She opens her laptop to reread old emails looking for reassurance. She finds none. The mind, once activated, does not settle because facts alone rarely calm an emotional alarm. This is one of the hardest truths to accept. Overthinking is often not a thinking problem. It is an emotional safety strategy. That matters because many people try to solve overthinking with more thinking. They search for the perfect explanation, the perfect certainty, the perfect answer. But the mind can always generate one more question, one more angle, one more possibility, one more what if. The trap is not that you lack intelligence. The trap is that intelligence, when driven by fear, becomes a servant of anxiety. So what do? First, stop treating overthinking as proof that you are failing. The more shame you add to it, the more pressure you create. Instead, try naming it with honesty and kindness. You might say to yourself, my mind is trying to protect me right now, but it is doing it in a way that is exhausting me. That simple shift lowers the inner conflict. You stop turning your mind into an enemy and begin relating to it as something that needs guidance. Second, notice when uncertainty is the real trigger. Often the mind is not upset because something terrible has happened. It is upset because something unclear has happened. A delayed reply, a change in tone, a decision without a guaranteed outcome. If you can identify uncertainty as the spark, you can begin responding to the discomfort itself instead of chasing endless answers. Third, remember that peace does not come from solving every possibility. It comes from building the capacity to remain steady even when not everything is known. The reflective takeaway here is simple. Your mind overthinks because it is trying to protect you from pain, uncertainty, and surprise. It is not a sign of weakness, but protection that never powers down becomes a prison. And once you begin to see overthinking as a costly strategy rather than a personal flaw, you are ready to understand what that cost really is. Chapter 2. The hidden cost of overthinking. Overthinking steals from you quietly. It rarely announces itself like a major catastrophe. It slips in gently, wearing the disguise of responsibility, self-awareness, or carefulness. It tells you that you are just being thoughtful, just being prepared, just trying to understand. But if you look closely at the life shaped by chronic overthinking, you begin to see its price. The cost is not only mental exhaustion, it is lost presence, lost confidence, lost sleep, lost joy, lost trust in your own ability to handle life as it comes. When the mind keeps circling, it pulls you away from the moment you are actually living. You can sit with people you love and still be absent. You can be at dinner while mentally revisiting something that happened at noon. You can be on vacation and still feel trapped in tomorrow. You can finish a conversation and then spend the next 3 hours editing it in your head, as though your mind is a cruel little court scribe documenting every syllable for judgment. This is one hidden cost of overthinking. It makes life hard to inhabit. Another cost is decision fatigue. The more you overanalyze, the harder it becomes to choose. You start treating ordinary decisions like high-stakes moral quests. Should you send the message now or later? Take the job or wait? Speak up or stay quiet? Rest or keep working? Even after you decide, overthinking does not let you move on. It asks whether the other option would have been better. It imagines alternate timelines. It turns choices into burdens and burdens into identity statements. Suddenly, one imperfect move feels like proof that your whole life is drifting off course. Psychology gives us a useful lens here. The human brain has limited cognitive energy. Attention is not infinite. Every time you run the same worry loop, you burn resources that could have gone toward creativity, connection, and recovery. Research on rumination, which is the repetitive focus on distress and its causes, shows that it is linked to anxiety, depression, lower problem-solving ability, and greater emotional distress. The more you churn without resolution, the more tired and discouraged you often become. This is why overthinking can feel productive while leaving you depleted. It mimics effort, but it often blocks movement. There is also a relational cost. When you overthink, you may become less available in your relationships. You may need constant reassurance. You may read too much into tone, timing, or silence. You may hesitate to be honest because you are already preoccupied with all the possible ways honesty could go wrong. Or you may withdraw altogether, not because you do not care, but because your inner world is so loud that connection starts to feel overwhelming. Consider a man named Eric who often replays interactions with his partner. If she seems tired one evening, he wonders whether she is upset. If her text is short, he wonders whether he did something wrong. Instead of asking calmly, he spends hours filling in blanks. By the time he brings it up, he is already tense, defensive, and emotionally flooded. The conversation that could have been simple becomes heavy. His partner feels confused. Eric feels misunderstood. The original problem may have been small, but overthinking enlarged it before reality ever had a chance to speak. Then there is the cost to self-trust. This one cuts deep. The more you overthink every move, the less you learn to trust yourself in motion. You begin to believe that peace is only possible after perfect certainty. But life does not offer perfect certainty. So you wait, you hesitate, you second guess. And slowly, the message beneath all of it becomes, I cannot handle things unless I have fully thought them through. That message is false but powerful. It keeps you dependent on mental rehearsal instead of lived resilience. The truth is that many of the hardest things you have survived were not survived because you predicted them perfectly. They were survived because, when the moment came, you adapted, you responded, you learned, you got through. Practical change begins with asking a different question. Instead of asking, how can I think enough to avoid discomfort, ask, what is overthinking costing me today? Is it costing sleep, focus, joy, intimacy, confidence? Naming the cost makes the pattern harder to romanticize. You can also create a gentle pause when you notice yourself looping. Ask, Is this thought helping me move forward, or is it keeping me emotionally busy? That question is not meant to shame you. It is meant to separate reflection from repetition. One more practical shift is to protect your energy like it matters, because it does. If a certain time of day, environment, or habit increases spiraling, notice it. Many people overthink most intensely when they are tired, alone, overstimulated, or scrolling late at night. Your mind is not a machine. It is deeply influenced by your conditions. The takeaway here is that overthinking does not just live in your head. It touches your sleep, your choices, your relationships, your body, and your sense of self. It drains the life you are trying to protect. And once you recognize the cost, it becomes easier to ask a more important question. How do thoughts become traps in the first place? Chapter 3. How Thoughts Become Mental Traps. Not every thought deserves a throne. That may sound obvious, but when you are overthinking, thoughts can arrive with the authority of law. They do not feel like passing mental events. They feel like urgent instructions, warnings, prophecies, or verdicts. A thought says, "You messed this up." They are disappointed in you. Something bad is coming. You are falling behind. You should have known better. And because the thought is vivid, repeated, or emotionally charged, it starts to feel true. This is how thoughts become mental traps. Not because they are always accurate, but because they are believed, rehearsed, and fed. The mind produces thoughts constantly. Some are useful, some random, some protective, some distorted. But when a thought hooks into fear, shame, or uncertainty, it can pull you into a loop. You return to it to examine it, challenge it, prove it wrong, prepare for it, or make sense of it. Ironically, the more attention you give it, the stronger it feels. Attention is fuel. What you revisit, you reinforce. In psychology, this process is often connected to cognitive fusion. That is when you become so entangled with a thought that you no longer experience it as a thought. You experience it as reality. Instead of saying, "I am having the thought that I will fail," the mind says, "I will fail." That small shift matters. One is an observation. The other becomes an identity or a destiny. Mental traps often begin with a believable seed. Maybe you made a mistake once, so now the mind says, "I always ruin things." Maybe one person left, so now the mind says, "People always leave." Maybe something unexpected happened, so now the mind says, "I need to be prepared for everything." These conclusions may feel protective, but they are usually broad, rigid, and emotionally loaded. Let's look at a familiar example. Maya sends a message to a friend and does not hear back for hours. A simple thought appears. Maybe they're busy. But another thought quickly arrives. Maybe I said something wrong. That thought creates discomfort. To reduce the discomfort, Maya starts mentally reviewing the last few conversations. Then she remembers a moment 2 weeks ago that felt slightly off. Then another thought appears. Maybe they've been annoyed for a while. Soon, she is not responding to what happened. She is responding to a mental construction built from fragments, guesses, and fear. The trap is not the first thought. The trap is the relationship to it. There are common distortions that strengthen these traps. Catastrophizing turns uncertainty into disaster. Mind reading assumes you know what others think. All or nothing thinking treats one mistake like a total collapse. Emotional reasoning says, "I feel afraid, therefore something must be wrong." None of these distortions make you foolish. They make you human. But once you recognize them, you are less likely to bow to them like they are ancient prophecy carved in stone. One reason these traps are so sticky is that the brain prefers closure. Unresolved situations can feel deeply uncomfortable. So the mind fills in gaps, even when it fills them in badly. It would rather have a painful story than an open question. At least a painful story feels definite. But peace often requires tolerating not knowing, without rushing to create meaning where there may be none. A practical way to loosen the trap is to change your language. Instead of saying, "This is true," try saying, "My mind is telling me a story right now." That does not mean the thought is false. It means you are stepping back enough to evaluate it. You are creating space between you and the mental noise. Another helpful practice is to ask, what is the evidence and what is the assumption? This is especially useful in emotionally loaded moments. If someone seems distant, the evidence may be that they replied briefly. The assumption may be that they are upset with you. Those are not the same thing. When they blur together, traps tighten. You can also ask, if this thought were completely solved, what feeling am I hoping to escape? Often beneath the thought is fear, shame, loneliness, or helplessness. The mind keeps analyzing the thought because it does not know how to soothe the feeling. When you go directly to the feeling with compassion, the thought sometimes loses power. The reflective takeaway is this: thoughts become traps when fear turns them into commands, when repetition makes them feel like truth, and when you forget that having a thought is not the same as receiving wisdom. And once you understand how the trap works, the next question becomes clearer. What tends to trigger these spirals in the first place? Chapter 4. Common emotional triggers. Overthinking rarely appears out of nowhere. It usually has a doorway. Sometimes the doorway is obvious. A hard conversation, a conflict, a mistake, a decision that carries risk. But often the doorway is subtle. A delay, a shift in someone's tone, a sense of being left out. A quiet evening after a busy week. A social media post that stirs comparison. A body that feels tired and tense. A moment that reminds you, even faintly, of an older wound. Triggers matter because overthinking is often less about the current event and more about what the event touches inside you. One person can receive a short text and shrug. Another can receive the same text and spiral for hours. The difference is not just the message. It is the meaning attached to it. If you have a history of rejection, being ignored may sting more sharply. If you grew up around criticism, small corrections may feel loaded. If your life has taught you that stability can disappear quickly, uncertainty may feel unbearable. Psychology helps explain this through emotional conditioning. The brain links current experiences to past ones, especially when those past experiences involved strong emotion. So a present-day moment can wake up an old alarm. You may think you are reacting only to what just happened, but part of your response may belong to something much older. Common triggers include rejection, ambiguity, conflict, failure, shame, comparison, loneliness, and loss of control. Even positive events can trigger overthinking. A new relationship can bring fear of losing it. A new opportunity can bring fear of not being good enough. Happiness itself can trigger worry in people who are used to waiting for the other shoe to drop. Think about someone named Danielle who gets invited to a dinner with new coworkers. On the surface, it is a normal social event. But for Danielle, who spent years feeling out of place in group settings, the invitation activates an old insecurity. Before the dinner even begins, her mind starts asking, what if I say something awkward? What if they realize I'm boring? What if I don't fit in? The current moment is simple. The inner history is not. This is why self-awareness is more useful than self-judgment. If you only say, "I overthink too much," you miss the deeper truth. But if you ask, "What does this situation touch in me?" you begin to see the pattern. Sometimes the trigger is not emotional content at all. It is depletion. Lack of sleep, overstimulation, hunger, hormonal shifts, chronic stress, or too much screen time can all lower your emotional resilience. A mind that might have handled uncertainty at 10 a.m. can spiral at 11 p.m. simply because your internal resources are low. That does not make the fear more valid. It makes your nervous system more vulnerable. This matters because many people interpret every spiral as a meaningful message. Sometimes it is not deep wisdom. Sometimes it is an exhausted brain trying to make sense of discomfort. A powerful practical exercise is to become a curious observer of your triggers. When you notice overthinking starting, pause and ask, what happened right before this? Did something make me feel rejected, uncertain, exposed, ashamed, or out of control? Did my body already feel strained before my mind latched onto the thought? Over time, patterns begin to emerge. You may notice that you spiral most after social interactions, during transitions, before sleep, after conflict, or when someone you love feels distant. You may notice that comparison is a huge trigger, or that unfinished tasks create mental pressure, or that your overthinking gets louder when you are physically run down. This is not about becoming obsessed with self-analysis. It is about learning your landscape so you can respond with wisdom instead of confusion. When you know your triggers, you can prepare gentler responses. If uncertainty is a trigger, you can remind yourself that not knowing is uncomfortable but not dangerous. If criticism is a trigger, you can separate feedback from identity. If loneliness is a trigger, you can reach for connection instead of spiraling in isolation. If fatigue is a trigger, you can tend to your body before believing everything your mind is shouting. The takeaway is this: triggers are not random. Overthinking often begins where your pain, history, and nervous system vulnerability intersect. The present moment pulls a hidden thread, and your mind responds as though the whole fabric is at risk. And that brings us to an essential distinction, one that can change everything once you really feel it: the difference between thinking and overthinking. Chapter 5. Thinking vs. Overthinking. Thinking helps you live. Overthinking keeps you stuck. At first glance, the difference can be hard to spot. Both involve reflection. Both can look serious, careful, and intelligent. Both may begin with a real question, but their direction is completely different. Healthy thinking moves you toward clarity. Overthinking moves you in circles. Healthy thinking leads to action, acceptance, or decision. Overthinking leads to more doubt, more tension, and more noise. One of the reasons people stay trapped in overthinking is because they mistake it for responsibility. They believe that if they stop mentally working on the problem, they are being careless. But there is a point where reflection stops serving you. After that point, it becomes compulsion. A simple way to tell the difference is to notice what happens after the thought process. Healthy thinking tends to leave you clearer, steadier, or more informed. Overthinking tends to leave you more drained, more confused, and less trusting of yourself. Healthy thinking asks, what matters here? What can I do? What do I know? What don't I know? What is enough for today? Overthinking asks, but what if I'm missing something? What if that tiny detail means more? What if I regret this forever? What if everyone sees what I fear? What if I never get it right? Psychologically, overthinking often involves rumination or worry. Rumination is usually focused on the past and on emotional pain. Worry is usually focused on the future and potential threats. Both create the illusion of engagement without providing resolution. You feel mentally active, but internally you are pacing the same hallway. Let's say Jordan needs to decide whether to apply for a new job. Thinking would involve reviewing the opportunity, considering timing, looking honestly at his skills, and deciding whether to apply. Overthinking would involve opening the application, closing it, imagining rejection, imagining success, imagining failure after success, comparing himself to strangers online, revisiting old disappointments, and delaying the decision until the emotional weight becomes unbearable. The original question was simple. The mind made it existential. There is another important distinction. Thinking is often intentional. Overthinking is often involuntary. Thinking feels like you are steering. Overthinking feels like you are being dragged. That difference matters because it reminds you that the problem is not your ability to think. It is your difficulty disengaging once fear has taken the wheel. A practical skill here is learning to set boundaries around thought. Not every question deserves unlimited access to your attention. You can give a concern 10 focused minutes, make a note, choose a next step, and then return to the present. That is not avoidance. That is leadership. You are telling your mind, we have addressed this enough for now. You can also ask one powerful question. Is this thought leading to action or just more thought? If there is a real step to take it. Send the message. Gather the information, make the plan, apologize, rest, ask the question, schedule the appointment. If there is no action available right now, more thinking may not help. It may only deepen the groove. Another useful practice is to watch your body. Thinking tends to feel grounded even when serious. Overthinking often feels urgent and tight. Your jaw clenches, your breathing gets shallow, your stomach knots, your attention narrows. The body often reveals the truth before the mind admits it. The reflective takeaway is this: thinking is a tool, overthinking is a trap. Thinking solves, clarifies, and supports. Overthinking spirals, inflames, and delays. The goal is not to become a person who never reflects. The goal is to become a person who knows when reflection has turned into self-torment. And one of the deepest places that turning often happens is around a need many people barely notice in themselves at all. The need for control. Chapter 6. The need for control. Overthinking often grows in the soil of control. Not always obvious control. Not domination. Not the kind that tries to command other people. More often it is internal control, the desperate effort to make life predictable enough to feel safe. The mind says, if I can figure this out completely, I won't get hurt. If I can prepare for every outcome, I won't be caught off guard. If I can read everyone correctly, I won't be rejected. If I can prevent mistakes, I won't feel shame. If I can stay mentally ahead, I will be okay. But life does not bend that neatly. And so the mind keeps pushing harder, like a person trying to stop the ocean with their bare hands, and then feeling shocked that their sleeves are wet. The need for control often develops honestly. Maybe you grew up in chaos. Maybe adults around you were unpredictable. Maybe mistakes were punished harshly. Maybe stability was rare, and you learned that being hyper-aware was the safest way to survive. In those environments, control is not vanity. It is adaptation. You learn to scan, prepare, anticipate, and manage. You become mentally vigilant because unpredictability once had real consequences. The trouble begins when that survival strategy becomes your default way of living. Psychology describes this in part through intolerance of uncertainty. Some people experience uncertainty as mildly uncomfortable. Others experience it as deeply threatening. When tolerance is low, the mind works overtime to create certainty where there is none. It rehearses conversations, seeks reassurance, checks for signs, revisits decisions, and imagines every possible future. Not because it enjoys suffering, but because uncertainty feels intolerable. Consider Priya, who is waiting to hear back after a medical test. The appointment was routine, and the doctor said there is no reason to panic. But once she gets home, her mind begins. She searches symptoms. She replays the doctor's tone. She checks the patient portal again and again. She tells herself she is being proactive, but by midnight she is shaking, exhausted, and no closer to peace. What she really wants is not more information. She wants certainty. And in the absence of certainty, the mind keeps demanding more effort. Control promises relief, but often delivers only temporary calm followed by more dependence. The more you rely on overthinking to feel safe, the less capable you feel without it. This creates a cycle. You think to gain control. The relief is brief. Uncertainty returns, so you think more. Soon, mental control becomes an emotional ritual. Breaking this cycle does not mean becoming passive. It means learning the difference between responsibility and control. Responsibility says, I will do what I can. Control says, I must eliminate all risk. Responsibility is grounded. Control is fear wearing a business suit and pretending it's your manager. A practical first step is to identify where you are trying to control the uncontrollable. Are you trying to control other people's reactions, the exact outcome of a conversation, whether everyone understands you perfectly, whether life unfolds without disappointment? These goals are impossible, which means they will keep your mind in constant labor. Then ask a gentler question. What is actually mine to hold here? Maybe it is your honesty, your effort, your preparation, your boundaries, your next step, your rest. Peace grows when you return your energy to what is actually yours. Another powerful practice is to allow small doses of uncertainty without rushing to fix them. Let a message sit unanswered for a while without inventing a story. Make a decision and resist reopening it 10 times. Enter a conversation without rehearsing every line. These moments may feel uncomfortable, but they slowly teach your nervous system that uncertainty is survivable. You are not training yourself to stop caring. You are training yourself to stop worshiping control. The reflective takeaway is this: much of overthinking is an attempt to trade uncertainty for safety. But life does not offer full control, and peace does not come from finally mastering the uncontrollable. Peace comes from learning to remain anchored even when not everything is guaranteed. And few things make us crave control more than the parts of life we cannot redo, especially the past. Chapter 7. Replaying the past. There is a particular kind of pain in wanting a second chance inside a moment that is already gone. The mind is strangely skilled at reopening old wounds. A conversation from 5 years ago, a choice you regret, a version of yourself you can barely forgive, something you should have said, something you wish you had not done. Sometimes the memory arrives quietly. Sometimes it rushes in with force. But when it does, it can feel as though the past is not past at all. It is alive in the present, pressing on your chest, asking for a verdict. Why do we replay the past so much? Because the past feels fixed, but our relationship to it does not. The mind keeps returning because it wants relief, understanding, closure, or redemption. It wants to solve what can no longer be changed. It wants to rewrite a scene that is already complete. In this sense, replaying the past is often grief mixed with control. Grief that it happened. Control in the wish that maybe, through enough mental effort, it can somehow be undone. Rumination is especially common when the memory involves shame. Shame tells you not only that you made a mistake, but that the mistake reveals something bad about who you are. So the mind revisits the moment looking for proof, explanation, or punishment. You may not even realize that punishment is part of the pattern, but many people overthink the past not to learn, but to keep paying for it. Take Marcus, who remembers an argument with his younger sister during a difficult time in their family. He said something harsh. They eventually repaired the relationship, and she has long since moved on. But Marcus hasn't. On quiet nights, the memory comes back. He hears his own voice. He winces. He thinks, what kind of person says that? He is no longer learning from the moment. He is resentencing himself inside it. Psychologically, The mind often confuses remembrance with responsibility. It believes that if you stop dwelling, you are minimizing what happened. But carrying pain forever is not the same as honoring it. In many cases, it is simply continuing the wound. The past does hold lessons. Reflection matters. Accountability matters. Repair matters. But there is a difference between learning and living in a courtroom of your own making. At some point, replaying stops being wise and becomes a refusal to let yourself return to the present. One practical shift is to ask, is there anything actionable here? If the answer is yes, take the step. Apologize, make amends, change the behavior, write the truth down, seek support. But if the answer is no, if the moment cannot be changed and no action remains, then your task is not more analysis. Your task is grief, compassion, and release. Another practice is to speak to your past self with more maturity than your shame does. Most people judge old versions of themselves with the wisdom they only gained later. Of course, you see more now. You have lived more. You have learned more. But the person in that memory did not have the insight you have today. This does not erase responsibility. It places it in context. You can say, I do not approve of everything I did, but I understand that I was doing the best I could with the awareness and capacity I had at the time. That sentence does not excuse harm. It restores humanity. It is also helpful to remember that memory is not a perfect record. It is shaped by emotion, repetition, and current mood. The more you replay a painful memory, the more dominant certain details may become. You may remember with intensity, not with balance. This is another reason why the mind's version of the past should not always be treated like flawless evidence. The reflective takeaway is this: replaying the past can feel like responsibility, but often it is unresolved pain asking for compassion. You do not heal by endlessly re-entering old scenes. You heal by taking the lesson, honoring the truth, and refusing to keep bleeding in a place that no longer exists. And as soon as the mind loosens its grip on yesterday, it often rushes toward tomorrow. Chapter 8. Fear of the future. The future is one of the mind's favorite stages for disaster. It is empty enough for projection, wide enough for fear, and uncertain enough for endless rehearsal. When you struggle with overthinking, the future can become a place where every unknown turns into a threat. The mind fills tomorrow with failure, loss, rejection, conflict, illness, loneliness, embarrassment, or collapse. And then it tells you that by imagining these things in advance, you are being prepared. But fear-based prediction is not preparation. It is pre-suffering. Many people live through painful events twice, sometimes 10 times before anything has even happened. They imagine the diagnosis before the appointment, the breakup before the conversation, the rejection before the application is read, the humiliation before the meeting begins. They spend emotional energy on futures that may never arrive, and in doing so, they miss the life that is already here. This happens because uncertainty is hard on the brain, and the brain prefers a story to a blank page. If it cannot guarantee a positive outcome, it often starts rehearsing negative ones. The mind believes that anticipating pain will soften the blow. But research and lived experience both tell us that chronic worry rarely improves performance or resilience. More often, it raises stress, narrows attention, reduces flexibility, and makes you feel less capable. Imagine a father named Ben whose daughter is about to leave for college. What begins as a natural emotional transition becomes a nightly spiral. He thinks about her being lonely, then unsafe, then lost, then making a life-altering mistake, then not needing him anymore. None of these fears are happening in the room where he sits, yet his body responds as though they are. His chest tightens, sleep becomes harder, tenderness turns into tension. Instead of enjoying the final weeks with her, he spends much of that time mentally bracing against imagined grief. That is the tragedy of future fear. It often steals from the present in the name of protection. There is also a hidden arrogance in anxious prediction, though not the prideful kind. More like the mind quietly acting as though it can know what has not happened. It predicts disaster with confidence, but rarely predicts grace with the same certainty. It imagines you crumbling, but rarely imagines you adapting. It sees the storm, but not your strength. It forecasts the fall, but forgets your history of getting back up. A practical way to challenge future fear is to ask, am I preparing or am I rehearsing pain? Preparation is specific and limited. It helps you take a useful step. Rehearsing pain is repetitive and emotionally consuming. It keeps you in imagined suffering without helping you respond more wisely. You can also ask, what do I actually know right now? This question brings the mind back from fiction to fact. Right now, what is true? What is in front of you? What evidence exists? Often, the future fear is built on possibilities, not realities. That does not make the fear silly. It makes it uncertain. Another grounding practice is to remember your track record. Not your track record of preventing all pain, because no one has that. Your track record of surviving, learning, adapting, and continuing. The mind loves to predict that you will not be able to handle what comes. Your life likely offers evidence to the contrary. You can also return to the body and the present moment through simple sensory anchors. Feel your feet. Notice the chair beneath you. Take one slow breath. Look around the room and name what is actually here. Overthinking about the future pulls you into a place that does not yet exist. Presence is the rope that brings you back. The reflective takeaway is this: fear of the future is often the mind's attempt to control uncertainty by imagining the worst. But imagining pain does not prevent pain. It only teaches your body to suffer early. And when fear takes over the mind, the body is never far behind. That is where we turn next. Chapter 9. The body and mental noise. Overthinking does not live in the mind alone. It echoes through the body. You can feel it in the jaw that never quite unclenches, the shoulders that hover too high, the racing heart, the tight chest, the uneasy stomach, the shallow breath. Sometimes the mind starts the spiral and the body follows. Sometimes the body becomes activated first, and the mind rushes in to explain the discomfort. Either way, thought and sensation become partners in a loop. This is why it can feel impossible to think your way out of overthinking. The experience is not purely cognitive. It is physiological. Once the nervous system is activated, the mind becomes more likely to scan for danger, create stories, and latch onto worst-case scenarios. And the more alarming the thoughts become, the more activated the body feels. Around and around it goes, like a weary carriage wheel stuck in mud, except the carriage is your nervous system and the mud is late-night anxiety. The body is not just reacting to your thoughts, it is shaping them. When your nervous system is in a fight-or-flight state, neutral things can feel threatening. Ambiguity becomes suspicious. Silence becomes ominous. Minor problems feel enormous. This is not because you are irrational. It is because your system is bracing. A bracing body creates a vigilant mind. Many people miss this and interpret every anxious thought as meaningful. But sometimes the thought is simply the mind trying to explain a body that feels unsafe. You wake up tense, and the mind immediately searches for a reason. It lands on money, work, health, a conversation, a memory. The topic changes, but the pattern is the same. Sensation comes first. Story follows. Consider Alicia, who notices that her overthinking is always worst late in the afternoon. She assumes that something in her life is becoming unbearable. But when she pays attention, She realizes she has been skipping lunch, staring at screens for hours and clenching her muscles without noticing. Her mind is not inventing stress from nowhere. Her body is already stressed, and her mind is making meaning out of that state. Psychology and neuroscience both support this close relationship between the nervous system and mental experience. When the body is dysregulated, the mind becomes less flexible. Emotional resilience drops, focus narrows, threat perception increases. This means that reducing overthinking often requires more than cognitive strategies. It requires tending to the body. One practical shift is to stop asking only, "What am I thinking?" and start asking, "What is happening in my body right now?" Are you exhausted, hungry, restless, tense, overstimulated, underrested, holding your breath? If so, the first intervention may not be another insight. It may be regulation. Try slowing your exhale. Try unclenching your jaw. Try placing a hand on your chest and one on your stomach. Try standing up, stretching, walking, drinking water, or stepping outside for a few minutes. These actions can seem almost insultingly simple when the mind is screaming for dramatic answers. But regulation works because the body speaks a direct language. When your physiology begins to settle, mental noise often softens. Sleep also matters more than many people want to admit. A tired brain is more emotionally reactive, less nuanced, and more vulnerable to looping thoughts. The same concern that feels manageable in daylight can feel catastrophic in the middle of the night. That does not mean the concern is suddenly profound at 1:30 a.m. It often means your nervous system is compromised. Movement matters. Stillness matters. Light matters. Breathing matters. The body is not a side note in emotional peace. It is one of the main gates. The reflective takeaway is this: overthinking is not only a mental habit, it is often a mind-body loop. When the body is tense, the mind gets louder. When the body feels safer, the mind has a better chance of softening. And once you understand that, you become far more capable of interrupting the spiral when it begins. Chapter 10. Interrupting thought spirals. A thought spiral does not need your permission to begin, but it does need your participation to continue. That may sound harsh at first, but it is actually hopeful. It means that even when you cannot control the first anxious thought, you can influence what happens next. You can learn to interrupt the pattern before it drags you deeper. You can step in before one concern becomes an entire internal drama with lighting, costume, and a tragic soundtrack performed by your most exhausted nerves. The first step in interrupting a spiral is recognition. Many people do not realize they are spiraling until they are already deep inside it. The mind feels so urgent, so convincing, that they treat it as reality instead of process. But there are signs. Repetition is one. The same question keeps coming back without new information. Urgency is another. Everything feels like it must be solved now. Catastrophic expansion is another. A small event starts connecting itself to larger fears, old wounds, and worst-case futures. The moment you notice these signs, say something honest and simple to yourself. I am in a spiral. Not everything is falling apart. Not I have to solve this tonight. Just I am in a spiral. That naming creates distance. It reminds you that this is a state, not the whole truth. From there, move out of pure thought and into interruption. One useful method is grounding. Bring your attention to what is physically real. Feel your feet on the floor. Press your back into the chair. Name 5 things you can see. Listen for 3 sounds. Hold something cool or textured. These acts are not childish. They are ways of telling the nervous system, come back here. We are in the room, not inside the imagined catastrophe. Breath can help too, especially lengthening the exhale. You do not need a perfect technique. Just inhale gently and exhale more slowly than you inhaled. Long exhales send a cue of safety to the body. When the body settles even slightly, the mind becomes easier to guide. Another interruption is movement. Spirals create trapped energy. A short walk, stretching, shaking out your hands, washing your face, or stepping outdoors can break the state enough to loosen the loop. The mind loves to convince you that you must stay seated and solve it. Often the wiser move is to stand up. Then there is the question of content. Ask yourself, is there a real problem to address right now? If yes, write D on the one next step, not the whole solution. The next step. If no action is possible, then remind yourself that this is not a problem-solving moment. It is a self-soothing moment. Some people benefit from scheduled thinking time. This sounds strange, but it is powerful. If a thought spiral begins at a bad time, you can say, I will return to this tomorrow at 3 p.m. for 15 minutes. Then write it down and redirect. This teaches your mind that concerns will be heard, but not obeyed at any hour they choose. Let's return to a real-life kind of moment. After a social gathering, Noah starts replaying what he said to a group of friends. The spiral begins. Did I talk too much? Was that joke awkward? Did they think I was trying too hard? Normally, he would spend the next 2 hours reviewing every sentence. But this time he notices the signs. Repetition, shame, urgency. He says, I'm spiraling. Then he puts his phone down, walks outside, breathes cold air, and names what is actually true. I had a normal conversation. I feel vulnerable because I care what people think. I do not need to solve my social worth tonight. The discomfort does not vanish instantly, but the spiral weakens because he stopped feeding it. Interrupting spirals is not about winning an argument with your mind. Usually that only creates another loop. It is about disengaging from the false emergency. It is about refusing to let every anxious thought become a mission. One more deeply useful practice is self-talk that is firm and kind. You might say, we are not doing this right now, or this can wait, or I know this feels urgent, but urgency is not the same as importance, or I am safe enough to pause. The tone matters. You are not bullying yourself into peace. You are guiding yourself back to steadiness. The takeaway here is this. Spirals lose power when they are recognized early, interrupted physically, grounded in the present, and denied endless mental fuel. You do not need to eliminate every anxious thought. You need to become better at not following everyone into the dark. And once the spiral slows, you can begin one of the most transformative practices of all, reframing the thought itself. Chapter 11. Reframing thoughts. A thought can be loud without being wise. Reframing does not mean pretending everything is fine. It does not mean coding pain with fake positivity or forcing yourself to smile over something real. It means questioning the first interpretation your fear offers and choosing a perspective that is more balanced, more accurate, and more humane. Overthinking is often built on distorted interpretations. The mind takes one detail and turns it into a sweeping story. A mistake becomes proof of failure. A pause becomes rejection. Uncertainty becomes danger. A delay becomes abandonment. These stories feel true because they match the emotion of the moment. But feelings are not always reliable narrators. Reframing begins with stepping back enough to ask, is there another way to see this? This is a core idea in cognitive psychology. Our thoughts shape our emotions, and our interpretations influence our behavior. When interpretations are rigid, extreme, or fear-driven, suffering intensifies. When thoughts become more flexible and grounded, emotional space opens up. The event may not change, but the inner experience of it can. Let's say you send a thoughtful message and get a short reply. The first thought might be, they're upset with me. Reframing does not require saying, they definitely adore me and everything is perfect. It might sound more like, I notice I'm assuming the tone means something personal. There could be many reasons for a short reply, and I do not have enough information to conclude the worst. That is not denial. That is emotional honesty without distortion. Or imagine you make a mistake at work. The overthinking thought says, I embarrassed myself. They'll never trust me again. Reframing might say, I made an error and I don't like how that feels. But one mistake does not define my competence. I can correct what I can and learn from it. Notice how the reframe keeps accountability without collapsing into identity. One reason reframing is hard is because anxious thoughts often feel like protection. If you soften them, your mind may worry you are becoming careless. But balanced thinking is not carelessness. It is clarity. It lets you respond to reality instead of to an exaggerated version of reality. A practical method for reframing is to write down the thought and then ask 4 questions. What is the thought? What emotion does it create? What evidence supports it? What evidence challenges it? Then ask one final question. What is a more balanced statement? This process slows down emotional momentum and returns you to nuance. Consider Alina, who thinks, I always ruin relationships. The emotion is despair. The supporting evidence may include a past breakup and a recent conflict. But the challenging evidence may include long friendships, repaired misunderstandings, and the fact that relationships end for many reasons. A more balanced statement might be, I've had painful relationship experiences and I still have areas to grow. But I do not ruin every connection. That is a fear-based conclusion, not an objective truth. Reframing also involves changing how you interpret uncertainty. The mind often treats uncertainty as proof of danger. But uncertainty can also mean possibility, complexity, incompleteness, or simply that more time is needed. Not knowing is not always bad news. Sometimes it is just not knowing. There is another kind of reframing that is deeply healing, reframing discomfort itself. Instead of saying, this anxiety means something is wrong, try, this anxiety means I am activated right now. Activation is real, but it is not always informative. A racing heart can mean fear, caffeine, exhaustion, excitement, grief, or stress. Sensation does not come with a perfect label. Your job is not to obey it instantly. Your job is to notice it with care. Reframing works best when it is believable. The mind will reject language that feels fake. So do not jump from I'm terrified to everything is amazing. Bridge gently. Move from catastrophic to balanced, from harsh to honest, from final to open, from self-condemning to self-respecting. The reflective takeaway is this: reframing is not lying to yourself. It is refusing to let fear be the only voice at the table. It is choosing interpretations that are more accurate, more compassionate, and more supportive of wise action. And sometimes the most important reframe of all is this one. Peace does not come from controlling everything. It comes from learning how to let go. Chapter 12. Letting go of control. Letting go is often misunderstood. People hear it and imagine indifference, passivity, or giving up. They imagine becoming detached from goals, relationships, or standards. But true letting go is not apathy. It is release. It is the decision to stop gripping what was never fully yours to control in the first place. For the overthinking mind, letting go can feel terrifying because control has become associated with safety. If you do not mentally manage everything, who will? If you stop bracing, won't life catch you unprepared? If you stop checking, reviewing, rehearsing, and predicting, won't something important slip through? These questions make sense, but they often hide a painful assumption. that your peace must be earned through constant mental labor. It does not. Letting go begins with recognizing the difference between influence and control. You can influence how you speak, how you prepare, how you rest, how you respond, how you repair, and how you care for your values. But you cannot control how others interpret you, whether every plan works, whether life unfolds without loss, or whether uncertainty disappears forever. Trying to control what is not yours creates chronic tension. Letting go is not pretending those things do not matter. It is acknowledging that gripping them harder does not give you mastery. It only steals your peace. Imagine a woman named Teresa who is trying to help her adult son make better choices. She lies awake replaying conversations, composing lectures in her head, thinking of ways to prevent every mistake he might make. Her love is real, so is her fear, but her overthinking does not change his freedom. It only deepens her exhaustion. Over time, she learns to say, "I can love him, support him, tell the truth, and set boundaries. I cannot live his life for him in my mind." That shift hurts at first. Then it frees her. Psychologically, letting go often requires grieving the fantasy of certainty. That fantasy may have kept you going for years. It may have told you that if you worked hard enough mentally, you could avoid pain, control outcomes, and protect everyone you love. Releasing that fantasy can feel like loss. But on the other side of it is reality, and reality, though imperfect, is often lighter than impossible control. One practical exercise is to make two mental circles. In one circle, place what is yours. Your choices, your effort, your honesty, your care, your boundaries, your healing. In the other circle, place what is not yours. Other people's thoughts, the exact timing of life, the past, all future outcomes, whether everyone approves, whether nothing ever changes. When the mind spirals, ask, which circle am I standing in right now? Then gently return to your own. Another practice is to use release language. You might say, "I release the need to know everything before I move." Or, "I release the need to manage how I am perceived." Or, "I release the fantasy that enough worrying can guarantee safety." These statements are not magic spells. They are reminders of where peace actually lives. Letting go also happens in small moments. Sending the message and not rereading it 10 times. Making the choice and not reopening it all night. Telling the truth without trying to control the response. Resting without earning it through exhaustion. Walking away from the question when no useful answer exists. The reflective takeaway is this: letting go is not losing your care. It is losing your illusion of control. It is choosing trust over compulsion, presence over grip, and reality over endless mental struggle. And once you stop feeding the need for total control, you can begin building something stronger and gentler every single day. A life that protects your peace. Chapter 13. Protecting your peace. Daily peace is not usually built in dramatic moments. It is built in daily ones. Many people imagine peace as something they will finally feel after the big problem is solved. The right person arrives, the pressure lifts, the finances improve, the healing is complete, and the future becomes clear. But peace rarely arrives as a grand reward at the end of perfect circumstances. More often, it is protected in ordinary ways, through habits so simple they can seem almost beneath notice. The daily life of an overthinker often contains many small leaks: constant checking, overexposure to noise, too little rest, too much comparison, conversations that drain, boundaries that blur, a schedule with no softness in it. A phone that follows you into every quiet moment like a town crier, announcing fresh reasons to worry. Protecting your peace means respecting the fact that your mind is affected by what you repeatedly allow in. Psychology calls this stimulus control in some contexts, but at a human level, it is simpler than that. Your environment shapes your inner world. What you consume influences what you carry. What you repeat becomes familiar. What you normalize becomes your baseline. If chaos surrounds you all day, your mind will struggle to feel settled at night. This does not mean building a tiny life or avoiding all stress. It means becoming more intentional. Notice what consistently leaves you restless, fragmented, and mentally noisy. Notice what consistently leaves you clearer, more grounded, and more like yourself. For one person, protecting peace might mean not checking email after a certain hour. For another, it might mean fewer conversations with people who only bring drama. For someone else, it might mean beginning the morning without grabbing their phone, so their nervous system has a chance to wake up before the world starts shouting. Let's imagine Rachel, who says she wants peace but starts every day by scrolling through headlines, messages, work notifications, and social media before even getting out of bed. By 8 a.m., her body is already braced. She has not had one private thought before the world filled her mind with urgency, comparison, and pressure. Once she changes that habit and creates even 10 quiet minutes in the morning, her internal tone begins to shift. Not perfectly, but noticeably. Protecting peace also means honoring your emotional limits. You are not required to process every person's chaos in real time. You are not required to answer every message immediately. You are not required to make yourself endlessly available while calling it kindness. Sometimes the most peaceful thing you can do is pause before saying yes. Another daily protector of peace is completion. Overthinking often feeds on mental clutter. Unfinished tasks, vague commitments, and decisions left open for too long can create background tension. You do not need a perfect life system, but small acts of closure help. Write things down, choose one next step, finish the little thing, make the appointment, put it on the calendar. Give the mind fewer loose threads to tug on at midnight. Ritual helps too. Human beings calm through repetition. A cup of tea in silence. A walk at the same time each evening. Stretching before bed. Reading instead of scrolling. A few slow breaths before opening your laptop. Simple rituals tell the nervous system we are allowed to settle. We are not in constant emergency. So does beauty. Soft light, clean space. Music that slows you down, fresh air, a blanket, a candle, a tree outside the window. These are not luxuries in the emotional sense. They are cues of safety and gentleness. The mind listens to them. One of the greatest daily protectors of peace is discernment about what deserves your full attention. Not every opinion deserves an answer. Not every thought deserves analysis. Not every invitation deserves acceptance. Not every problem is yours to carry. Peace grows where discernment lives. The reflective takeaway is this: peace is not an accident. It is protected through boundaries, rhythms, environments, choices, and small acts of self-respect repeated over time. You do not stumble into calm. You cultivate it. And in a world that rewards noise, urgency, and endless stimulation, that cultivation becomes an act of quiet strength. Which leads us to the final chapter. Chapter 14. Becoming calm in a loud world. The world is loud in more ways than one. It is loud with information, opinions, expectations, warnings, demands, comparisons, updates, and pressure. It is loud with the suggestion that your value depends on productivity, your relevance depends on visibility, and your safety depends on staying hyper-aware at all times. It is loud with speed, loud with urgency, loud with other people's fear, loud with stories about what you should be, should know, should fix, should achieve, should become. In such a world, calm can feel unnatural, even suspicious. If you are not constantly reacting, are you missing something? If you are not worried, are you careless? If you are not pushing, comparing, tracking, and striving, are you falling behind? But calm is not ignorance. It is not withdrawal from reality. It is the ability to stay rooted in yourself while reality moves around you. Becoming calm in a loud world means building an inner life that is not fully governed by external noise. It means deciding that not every signal deserves access to your nervous system. It means learning to pause before absorbing urgency as your own. It means realizing that peace is not the absence of information, but the presence of inner steadiness. This kind of calm is not passive. It is deeply active. It requires attention, practice, and courage, because the world often rewards reactivity. Calm can be mistaken for lack of ambition, lack of care, or lack of awareness. But real calm is often the result of profound emotional discipline. It comes from knowing what to let in, what to release, what to question, and what to trust. A person becoming calm in a loud world does not necessarily have fewer responsibilities. They may still work hard, love deeply, face uncertainty, and move through pain. The difference is that they no longer give every thought a microphone. Think about Samuel, who used to spend every spare moment consuming commentary, reacting to texts immediately, staying available to everyone, and filling silence with screens. He told himself he was staying informed and connected, but inwardly he was frayed. Eventually, he began making small changes. Less noise in the morning, fewer arguments online, more walks without headphones, more moments of asking, do I actually need to carry this right now? Over time, he noticed something remarkable. Life had not become silent, but he had. Not numb, not disconnected, just quieter inside. That quietness is not emptiness. It is space. Space to think clearly, space to feel without flooding, space to respond instead of react, space to hear your own deeper wisdom beneath the chatter. Psychologically, calm grows when attention becomes less hijacked. The more intentionally you direct your focus, the less vulnerable you are to every external and internal trigger. This is not about controlling all thoughts. It is about strengthening the observing self, the part of you that can notice noise without becoming it. One practical way to develop this is through micro-pauses. Before answering, before checking, before assuming, before spiraling, pause. One breath, 1 second of noticing, one moment of asking what is needed here. That tiny pause is where freedom begins. Another practice is choosing depth over constant input. Read something nourishing slowly. Have one honest conversation instead of 10 shallow ones. Sit outside without multitasking. Let music be music instead of background distraction. The mind that is always consuming rarely feels full. Often it feels crowded. Calm also grows through identity. At some point, you stop seeing peace as a temporary state you occasionally stumble into and start seeing it as something you are allowed to protect. You begin to say, I am someone who values steadiness. I am someone who does not owe every fear my full attention. I am someone who can be present even when life is uncertain. Identity shapes behavior. Behavior reinforces identity. Quietly, a new self begins to emerge. This does not mean you will never overthink again. You probably will. There will still be tender days, triggered days, exhausted days, grief-filled days, and uncertain days. But calm is not the absence of disturbance. It is the ability to return, again and again, without drama, without self-hatred, without turning one hard hour into a story about who you are forever. The reflective takeaway is this: becoming calm in a loud world is not about escaping life. It is about building an inner refuge within it, a place where your thoughts can pass without ruling you, a place where your peace is not for sale to every noise around you. And now, after all these chapters, we come to the quiet place where everything we have explored gathers into one final reflection. Final reflection. You do not have to fight your mind to find peace. You do not have to become thoughtless, emotionless, perfectly disciplined, or permanently unbothered. You do not have to reach some mythical level of human evolution where uncertainty never touches you and awkward memories no longer visit at inconvenient hours like uninvited ghosts with excellent timing. You do not have to be flawless to be free. What you need, more than perfection, is a new relationship with your thoughts, a relationship built on awareness instead of automatic obedience, a relationship built on compassion instead of shame, a relationship built on boundaries instead of endless access. Overthinking may have been your attempt to stay safe, to stay prepared, to stay in control, to stay ahead of pain. And for that, your mind deserves understanding. It was trying. It was protecting in the only way it knew how. But now you know more. Now you can guide it with greater wisdom. You can notice the trigger before it becomes a spiral. You can feel the body and tend to it. You can ask whether a thought is helping or haunting. You can separate evidence from assumption. You can release what is not yours to control. You can let the past teach without letting it imprison. You can meet the future without living there early. You can protect your peace in small daily ways. You can become quieter inside even when life around you is not. And perhaps most importantly, you can return. That word matters. Return. Because peace is not something you either have forever or lose forever. It is something you return to after the hard day, after the sleepless night, after the trigger, after the old memory, after the moment you got pulled into the loop again. You return without shame. You return without turning the detour into a personal failure. You return because returning is the practice. So tonight, or this morning, or wherever this finds you, let this truth settle gently in your chest. You are allowed to live without solving every thought. You are allowed to rest before everything is figured out. You are allowed to trust yourself even while learning. You are allowed to feel uncertain and still be safe enough. You are allowed to release the noise and keep the wisdom. You are allowed to protect your peace like it matters because it does. Take one slow breath in and let it go. The mind may still speak. That is what minds do. But it does not have to be the ruler of your life. You can listen without surrendering. You can feel without drowning. You can think without becoming trapped. You can be present without being perfect. And in that quiet shift, peace begins again. Thank you for listening to BlueWave Audiobooks. May your mind soften. May your body rest. May your heart remember that it was never meant to carry every possible tomorrow. And may you keep choosing, one gentle moment at a time, the calm that has been waiting for you all along.